A couple of weeks ago, we broke down the only running backs we feel comfortable drafting early. So now let's get to the middle rounds. Which running backs should you be targeting?
If you can't wait to start drafting fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog Fantasy has drafts going on all offseason with tons of unique and fun formats. Not to mention their flagship Best Ball Mania 5, where one lucky winner will become a millionaire. Plus, they already have pick'em lines ready for week 1 of the NFL season and their new streak format where you can win 1,000 times your entry. Just go to UnderdogFantasy.com and sign up using promo code ENDGAME to get a special pick'em that you can't get anywhere else, plus up to $250 in bonus cash.
Remember that ADPs always are shifting and moving throughout draft season. So that brings us to our first running back. On ESPN leagues in round 5, the only running back really that goes in this range according to the current draft position is Kenneth Walker. Now, Chris, a couple weeks ago, Kenneth Walker was technically a 4th-round pick at the very end. He's dropped a couple of spots. Does that make you like him more in this range?
It does, but not just the fact that he's dropped to the 5th round. If I could go back in time, I would have said absolutely draft Kenneth Walker in round 4, but didn't know what we know now, and that is that the Seattle Seahawks are talking up Kenneth Walker as a 3-down back, as a pass-catching back. I've always said the first 2 years of his career, Kenneth Walker is fine in fantasy, but without that pass catching, he doesn't give you a very high floor, a very high ceiling. He's very touchdown dependent. If he's going to get pass catching work this year, Kenneth Walker could be an absolute stud. So Kenneth Walker in the 5th round, absolutely taking him every time.
Yeah, and this particular platform on ESPN, the fact that he's the only RB here and there's this big drop off until we see more running backs drafted, that shows you there's kind of a cliff after this tier, this range of running backs, the guys who were drafted technically before him in round 4 that we talked about on that last video. So it's not like you have to get a running back before this range, but if you want a very high end RB2, or look, hey, maybe Kenneth Walker becomes a fantasy RB1 this year for the reasons you mentioned, then this is a great value. Now, we're going to get more choices on Yahoo and Sleeper. It turns out they've got the exact same 4 running backs going on average in round 5. That would be still Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, and James Conner. A lot of vets to pick from here, but who do you actually like?
Well, obviously, Kenneth Walker, just talked him up a bunch. I'm grabbing Kenneth Walker here. The other 3, I would really rather get these guys around later. I think Alvin Kamara, James Conner, and Aaron Jones will be fine this year, but they don't excite me in round 5. I mean, maybe if you went 4 straight wide receivers and you were absolutely desperate here, but even then, I don't know if I would pull the trigger on these guys in round 5. So Kenneth Walker for sure. The other 3, I'd really prefer at least a round later.
Yeah, I'm with you on Walker, of course. Love him this year, especially at this value, you could call it. Kamara, I think we're also in sync. Not expecting a great season. His efficiency keeps dropping. I just think it's too soon to hitch my wagon to him on a weekly basis. And look, I don't mind if you do wait for running back, especially if you maybe have a 0 RB build and you get somebody like Jones and Connor who has weekly upside and is pretty dependable. I just feel like it's a little too early. I'd much rather wait for these guys in round 6 if they drop. Let's get to round 6. Now on ESPN, only 2 running backs get drafted here. It's Aaron Jones and Rhamondre Stevenson. What's your feeling here if you're picking between the 2?
Well, if I'm picking between the 2, I prefer Rhamondre Stevenson. I just think this is going to be an offense that's going to lean more on the running game. I think Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be the guy getting the bulk of the work in this offense. We know he can catch passes, but I also do like Aaron Jones here in round 6. I mean, he still showed juice last year. He didn't look dusty at all. Again, I don't love it in round 6, but I certainly prefer it over round 5.
Yeah, I think this feels just about right for both of these players. Again, if you want to grab your RB2, like somebody who's proven, not take a chance, because look, this year's rookie RB class isn't overwhelmingly impressive. And so I think this is a good spot to either take a high-end RB2 or, again, you're waiting and really waiting on RB, you can still hit your wagon to a workhorse like Rhamondre. Now in Yahoo Leagues, round 6, we got Rhamondre, Raheem Mostert, who had a breakout last year at the tender age of, 30, 31, Zamir White, and Najee Harris.
All right, well, obviously Rhamondre I'm okay with. I'm really surprised to see Raheem Mostert this early. He usually doesn't go this early, but I still think Raheem Mostert will be good this year for however many games he ends up playing. Absolutely loves Zamir White here as well. I think he could definitely be a workhorse running back in this Raiders offense. And I am coming around on Najee Harris, but I don't know if I'm coming around on round 6 Najee Harris. So I'll take the other 3, but I'll pass on Najee again. Would like to get him around maybe 2 later.
Well, as I said, Rhamondre here is just about right. I'm all in on Zeus. So round 6, Zamir White for a guy who should be the workhorse, no problem. Raheem Mostert, I've been saying I think he's getting a little disrespected based on what he did last year, based on that offense. But I really would like to get him later if possible because, look, there is risk, not just his age, injury history, but also maybe Achane does take over a lot more than we think. So I really rather wait on Mostert, and I'm waiting pretty much forever on Najee Harris. I can't do it. I'm out. And then in sleeper round 6, we see a trio of running backs with some different names here. We see David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, and Rhamondre Stevenson. Do either of those 2 new names interest you this early?
No, I mean, Monty, I've talked about Monty many times, and I get the same response. 13 touchdowns last year. How can you fade this guy? Well, I don't think he's going to have 13 touchdowns this year. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have more touchdowns, and I also don't think he's going to have the amount of carries he had last year, and he doesn't catch any passes. So, again, just feels too early for David Montgomery in this offense. And DeAndre Swift, I do like Swift. I see the potential for Swift. I also see the risk. Another guy I would really like to get around later if possible.
Feel the same way as far as Swift. I just worry that this is going to be a full-blown committee with all 3 guys rotating in and out. Swift has that weekly upside, which you love, but a little bit more in best ball than a redraft league. I don't like the risk here. And then Monty feels risk-free mostly, but what's the ceiling really with Gibbs there? So I would rather wait at least one more round.
Do you want to win your fantasy league but don't have time to do all the research? Are you tired of drafting mediocre teams and then having to constantly hope you hit it big on the waiver wire just to compete? Do you wish you could have a fantasy expert like Pierre or myself with you while you draft? Well, now you can. With our app Draft Lane and our live draft pilot, we will guide you through every pick of your draft and tell you exactly which players we would pick if we were on the clock. Our proprietary algorithm will take into account your league settings, scoring, and roster requirements to identify the best picks every time you are on the clock to ensure you have a winning team from week 1. It's the closest thing you can get to having us there drafting with you. Get the biggest edge in fantasy football. Just go to your app store and search for Draft Lane and download it today and get ready to dominate your draft.
Now on to round 7. In ESPN leagues, you're choosing between Zamir White, David Montgomery, and DeAndre Swift. Are you good with all of these guys at this point?
Well, I'm definitely good with Zamir White. Said good with him in the 6th. Absolutely give me him in the 7th. I do feel like this is where I'm okay taking Swift. Like if I really feel like I need a running back here and Zamir White's gone, fine, I'll take Swift. Look, maybe I'm going to be wrong on David Montgomery this year, but I just, like you said, just a floor at best, right? A touchdown-dependent floor play. I feel like I can get that later in the draft, so maybe I'll be wrong. I'm not taking Monty in round 7 either.
Well, I will say this, regardless of what platform you use, this also depends on your league settings. A lot of people use custom settings, PPR, half, or standard, or should I say non-PPR. Look, if you're playing in a non-PPR league, that does give a boost to Monty. If it's full PPR, that gives a slight boost to Swift. But either way, I'm still taking Zamir White out of these 3. And Yahoo leagues, Swift stands alone. He's the only running back going in that range according to current ADP. You okay with that?
Again, like I just said, I'm okay with it. If you're at the point, maybe you went hero RB and you only have 1 running back at this point and you have, 5 wide receivers and a QB or whatever you did in your draft. Sure, I'll take DeAndre Swift here if I have to, but don't love it.
And just to add on to that, if you are going 0 RB, which is a strong strategy if done correctly, you got, let's say, 4 receivers, a tight end, a quarterback, I don't really want Swift as my RB1 because there are other 0 RB types that you can target that I feel more comfortable with, but maybe that's just me. And on Sleeper, we finally see a new name here, Tony Pollard, along with Najee Harris, Zamir White, and Raheem Mostert. What do you think of this mix?
Well, obviously, I'm taking Zamir White. Talked about that. I'm taking Mostert. Talked about him before. Najee. Is 7th round okay for him? I don't know. I feel like I'd want to push it one more round if possible, if I can with Najee. And this feels too early for Tony Pollard to me. I mean, look, maybe Tony Pollard will be better this year in this Tennessee offense, but I'd rather just wait and get Tyjae Spears later, to be honest.
Well, I feel the same way. I'm in on Zamir White. I'm out on Najee Harris. I think this is fine for Mostert. And then Pollard, no, I don't really think he's necessarily the 1A over Spears. I mean, maybe it's strict 50-50. If that's the case, why not wait a couple rounds and get Spears? All right, now in the eighth round, believe it or not, ESPN leagues, this is where James Conner is getting drafted. And then you see Jonathan Brooks, the rookie, Brian Robinson in Washington, and Jaylen Warren, the counterpart to Najee in Pittsburgh. How do you feel about these running backs at this point, basically the end of the middle rounds?
Well, I'll say Connor here is a smash pick for me. Like, I will happily take James Conner in the 8th round, no problem. Same with Brian Robinson. I think Brian Robinson, okay, again, look at David Montgomery and Brian Robinson. Okay, David Montgomery, sure, better offensive line, but both going to be guys that are going to, get carries, going to need touchdowns, probably not going to catch a ton of passes. It wouldn't shock me if Brian Robinson and David Montgomery have very similar numbers by the end of the season. So just give me Brian Robinson here. As far as Jonathan Brooks, I do like Jonathan Brooks, but now we're hearing probably not on the field till at least week 3, week 4, coming back from ACL. I'd like to get him later if possible because I think he's just going to sit on your bench doing nothing for many, many weeks. And Jaylen Warren, I mean, I like Najee because I think he fits the scheme better. I think Jaylen Warren is a trap in drafts this year. I'm not taking him.
Well, if I'm out on Najee, does that mean I'm in on Warren? No, it means I'm out on the Steelers running game, thanks to Arthur Smith. James Conner is probably the best example of how different ADP can be because you got him a full 3 rounds later on ESPN as opposed to Yahoo. Yeah, at this point, if he's still there, you've got to snap him up. I like Brian Robinson here. I still think he's undervalued. And as far as Brooks goes, love the player, love the talent. The situation is going to be better than people think. But this is a player, honestly, I'd rather not draft and wait till midseason when the guy who did draft Brooks kind of gets frustrated and tired of holding him, and then I try to buy low on him instead. Now on Yahoo, we've got several names and a couple. I know you'll like this one. Nick Chubb going at this point in Yahoo leagues along with Zach Moss, Jaylen Warren, Tony Pollard, and Brian Robinson. Okay, I know that you're not in on Chubb this year, but do you feel like this is a good enough value?
No, not a good enough value for a guy who doesn't sound like he's anywhere close to seeing the field, who knows when he's going to see the field. And then when he does see the field, he's going to have many weeks where he's being eased back into action and giving you nothing. So, no, really the only guy out of this group that I actually like is Brian Robinson. It's a little closer for me on Tony Pollard here. Again, I would still prefer to wait and get Tyjae Spears maybe in the next round or round 10 whenever he goes. But Brian Robinson's really the only guy I like out of this group. Pollard is okay.
Yeah, I'm still waiting. Again, Pollard kind of flopped in Dallas. Spears was good in his chances. He had last year in Tennessee. I'm still out on Pollard. I'm out on Warren. I'm avoiding Chubb as well. Still like B-Rob. And I think it's interesting that Zach Moss going here because maybe he's technically the RB1 in Cincinnati, but the same logic applies. I'll wait a round or two later and take Chase Brown instead. And then on Sleeper, round 8 running backs include Jonathan Brooks, Nick Chubb, Zach Moss, Jaylen Warren, and Javonte Williams. Anybody stand out here?
Well, yes, we've already talked about everybody but Javonte Williams, so you know how I feel about those guys. I am all in on Javonte Williams in round 8. I mean, it's pretty crazy how, we went from this guy is fighting for the last roster spot to, oh, this guy is the clear RB1 in Denver and actually looks really good. Like, you are getting a true number 1 running back who's a talented running back, who's a talented pass-catching running back in a Sean Payton offense in round 8. Yeah, no problem with Javonte here.
Well, look, Javonte is a talented running back, and I'd like to buy into him, but I'm just getting kind of bad vibes from that whole Denver offense. I'm a little bit pessimistic because I was not a fan of Bo Nix necessarily. I'm not overly impressed by what Sean Payton has done, really, since Drew Brees retired in the NFL with either New Orleans or Denver. So I'm going to say I'd rather wait and not deal with that potential committee. So really, I kind of don't want to take any of these running backs at this point. If you didn't catch the early round version of this video, we talk about the running backs you should be targeting in rounds 1 through 4. You can catch it right here.